Well, ladies, thank you so much. We thoroughly enjoyed that. We have been studying the life of Abraham for, I think this is the 12th or 13th week, and our text today is Genesis chapter 24. If you don't have the handout now, you will be lost. Somebody need that handout. All right, we have a hand up here. Keep your hand up, and Gil will bring a handout to Gil. And are we out of handouts? I've got an extra one here if somebody needs it. Anybody need my handout? Anybody? Okay. Now, I want you to know that Genesis 24 is the longest chapter in the book of Genesis. 50 chapters in Genesis, and here is the longest, 67 verses. Now, we're not going to go through all 67 verses. I have eliminated about 27 of them and kept 40 that will enable us to rightly, appropriately, adequately trace the story. Now, what is Genesis 24 about? Not creation, not salvation, but it is about marriage. Why? Because God promised Abraham that he would have innumerable children through one son, Isaac, his only son. And in Genesis 21:12, God said to Abraham, only through Isaac shall your innumerable offspring come and be called. But as long as Isaac remains unmarried, God's promises to Abraham are unfulfilled. The great wars and the rise and falls of kingdoms that occurred during this time are disregarded as relatively insignificant because God is focusing on the details of his promises to his people. Now, one of the themes that I heard over and over again in the United States Marine Corps is give attention to detail. Why? Well, a small detail can lead to victory or, if neglected, to defeat. You can get the wrong people killed in battle without paying attention to detail. And Jesus said God does just that. He gives attention to detail. How about this? Don't you know, he told his disciples, that God numbers all the hairs of your head? My, what detail that is. And Genesis 24 reveals divine providence working in behalf of God's people. Abraham sends his senior, most trusted servant 400 miles from Canaan to Mesopotamia to find a wife for his son Isaac. He doesn't send Isaac to Mesopotamia to fetch a wife, but rather his servant. Now, apart from God, this is almost mission impossible. The servant doesn't know a soul in Mesopotamia, yet he must convince a woman he doesn't know to leave her home and family and go with him to a foreign country to marry men she doesn't know, and nobody knows whether he and she will like each other, and he's got to convince that woman's family to let her go. He is looking for a needle in a haystack. If there was ever an enterprise lacking probability of success, this was it. But we're going to factor in God. Abraham's command to his servant in verse 4 I don't have it. Verse 4, Abraham says to his servant, go take a wife for my son. That is going to be answered toward the end of the chapter by the family saying to the servant, take our daughter and go. So God is going to bring about success. Now, this chapter is going to illustrate Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. What's with all your heart mean? Not partially, not half-heartedly, not mostly, completely, totally. And do not lean just on your excellent mind and good understanding. Use your head, use your understanding, but don't lean completely on that. In all your ways, in all your decisions, in all your pursuits, in all your endeavors, acknowledge Him. Take God into account, and he will make straight your paths. Now, the Hebrew make straight really means two things. He will make clear the way you should go. And secondly, he will make smooth your way. Now, why does it say make smooth? There will be obstacles and barriers in your path. Even though God's pointed it out, those barriers will keep you from going down that path to success. God will smooth out your path. He will remove the obstacles and the barriers. Now, I want to sum up this lengthy chapter in one sentence. I do want to mention Proverbs 20:24. A man's steps, his decisions, circumstances, the way he's going in life are from the Lord. How then can a man understand his way? Now, I want to sum up the whole chapter in this one sentence. God continues his covenant plan by providentially providing Isaac a wife. Now, that word plan, that's really sticking in my mind from yesterday. Sue and I were at the Moody Bible Institute graduation, and the guest speaker was Valerie Bell, just a common, ordinary young woman who graduated from Moody in 1980, and God led her to work with Awana that emphasizes ministering to children, and she started as emptying garbage cans for Awana, and just rose, and eventually appointed her to be the head, the president, the CEO of Awana. She was overwhelmed. She couldn't believe it. And they said, no, we want you. And long story short, what an incredible ministry. And you have to remember, she's giving the commencement speaker to the graduates yesterday of Moody. And what was she saying? God has a plan for you and your life. And what was God's plan in Valerie Bell being appointed the CEO of Awana Ministries in Africa? I don't know how she did this, but she has convinced 14 countries to give Christian education in every single school of those 14 countries. And they've had an enormous harvesting of souls, not just of children, but of teachers in those 14 countries as well. So God really has a plan, and here He continues working with His plan by providentially providing Isaac a wife. And our chapter breaks down into these 4 paragraphs. First 9 verses talk about the need of a wife. And then 10 through 27, the search for a wife. 28 through 61, the wife to be is found. And now there is a resolution of the need and the finding of that wife. Okay, so let's take that handout that you've been given, and lo and behold, what translation is this? Does anybody recognize what translation this is? This would be the, believe it or not, the King James translation. So, Lurleen, we're doing this for you. Okay, now Abraham's old age reminds him, it is time for my boy to marry. Abraham was old. Well, how old was he? Well, do you remember how old Abraham was when Isaac was born? Anybody? 100 years old. Now how old is Isaac? 40. Okay, so my wife and I have been praying for a wife for our 42-year-old son, Jeffrey. Jeff has a good cat, but he needs something more than a good pet. He needs a godly wife. So we're praying for a wife for him. We're praying for a wife for Pierre, wonderful graduate of Moody, who's a youth pastor, and he's about 36 years old, and he needs a godly wife. I'm praying for the son of Dr. Michael Radelnick, the academic dean of Moody, who used to attend this church. His son, Seth, needs a wife. I'm praying for a wife for not old Gil. You got a wife, don't you? So, and a good one too. And I'm praying for a wife for young Gil back there. And I'm praying for a wife for Steve Jacob. So I think that Abraham's convinced his 40-year-old boy, young man, needs a wife. So Abraham was old, well stricken in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things except a daughter-in-law. Now Abraham assigns the task of finding her to his senior, most trusted servant. And so he calls him in, he tells him the servant what he wants to do, and he says to the servant in verse 3, I will make you swear by the Lord God of heaven. Oh, this is going to be serious here. Don't just give me your word, don't just promise me. I want you to take an oath on this. You're not going to go back on this. And what's the oath about? That you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I dwell. Now, why is he so strong on that? Abraham knows these women. They are under Canaan's curse, Genesis 9 and verse 26. And Abraham bears scars when he went down to Egypt and married a woman that was improper for him. Now, when I was a first-year student at Dallas Seminary, Sue and I took our dirty clothes to the washateria to wash them, and I met a Christian man there. Now, at that point, I'm 24. He must have been 50, 55, 60 years old. And he and I struck up a conversation. I sensed he was really serious about the Lord. So he and I, every Friday night, started going out and knocking on doors and witnessing to people. He had a real heart for God. He wasn't educated, but he just loved God. And he didn't even tell me. I was his friend. He up and got married. I didn't know about it. Didn't even meet his wife. And later, not too long after he got married, I said, how are things going? He said, my wife, I like to listen to good Christian music on the radio, not her. She likes to listen to all this honky-tonk music. And she doesn't want to go to church. She wants to go to the bars. She likes to watch TV and all these worldly movies. She don't want to pray with me. She don't read the Bible with me. I felt so sad for him. He married the wrong kind of woman. Abraham knows what these Canaanite women are like. He doesn't want one as a daughter-in-law. Now, verse 4 spells out the oath. But you shall go to my country, that's Mesopotamia, and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son. Now, Abraham senses those women from Mesopotamia are more moral than the women down here in Canaan. Now, this week I was watching a Muslim woman walk through a neighborhood. They have a mosque, just a stone's throw from our house. So lots of Muslims. But I was watching this Muslim woman walk down the sidewalk. You could only see her eyes, dressed in that full Muslim dress. I just suspect that not a few Muslim women are shocked at how immodest many of our American women dress. It seems like some of our American women, thankfully not all American women are like this. There are plenty of modest women in our country, Americans, but not a few American women I think are exhibitionists. They like to see and how little they can dress when they go. I just suspect that these Muslim women, when they come to America, are shocked at what they see. So, you shall go to my country and to my kindred and take a wife for my son. Now, the servant asked a legitimate question in verse 5. And the servant said to him, peradventure. Now, let's pause there and think about that word, peradventure. I'd like to know, how many times this past week have you used peradventure? This past year? This past decade, have you ever in your life used the word peradventure? Let's use the word perhaps. The servant said to him, perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me unto this land. Must I, she doesn't know me. I'm going to ask her to come to a foreign country. I'm going to ask her to marry a man she doesn't know. I'm going to ask her to leave home, family, friends, customs, etc., etc. There's a good chance she's not going to come. So must I needs bring thy son again unto the land from which you came? Now, if she doesn't come to Palestine, shall I come back and take your boy and take him to Mesopotamia to marry her? I got the right girl, if I find the right girl, but she won't come. Shall I take Isaac up there? Now remember, God promised to give to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob and to the rest of their offspring the land of Canaan. Boy, notice his reply in verse 6. Abraham almost gets upset. And Abraham said unto him, beware that thou not bring my son thither again. Don't you even think about doing that. Abraham remembers, he left Canaan one time. He went down into Egypt, and boy, did he get into a lot of trouble there. And he bears to this hour the scars inflicted on him by leaving the promised land against the will of God. Now the servant packs and leaves in verse 10. And the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand. Now, why is he taking a lot of loot, wealth with him? Well, there are a number of reasons. It's to impress the bride's family, because he's going to tell the bride's family how wealthy God has made him. But what evidence does he have of that? To prove Abraham's wealth. And some of it is for the bride's price. It was the custom back then that when you married a woman, you gave her family a price to reimburse them for her loss. They spent time and money and effort in raising her, and then when she leaves their family, which benefits from her presence, and goes to another family, her new family needs to reimburse to some degree the loss of that wife. And then also to assure the bride and her family that she will be well provided for. She's going to marry a man who will be the sole heir of wealthy Abraham, and also there will be considerable travel expenses going and coming that they have to pay for. So the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia, 400 miles away, to Nahor's city, that's Haran. Now, the caravan arrives in verse 11, and he made his camels to kneel down by the city, without the city, it means outside the city, by a well of water at that time of the evening, the time that women go out to draw water. So he's using common sense. He knows when women tend to go to the wells, the spring, to draw water, here's an opportunity for him to meet, to observe a lot of local women in this area. Now, he wisely begins the search with prayer. And because he's going to begin with prayer, things will turn out well. Verse 12, and he said, O Lord, God of my master Abraham, I pray thee, send me good speed this day, and show kindness unto my master. Lord, lead me to the right woman for the sake of Abraham and for the sake of Isaac. Verse 14 states his request. Let it come to pass. Now, he's going to be looking for certain qualities in Isaac's wife, such as industrious, hospitable. Now, she's going to measure up to all of this. Kindness to animals, humble, sexually pure, honors her family. Oh, look what wonderful characteristics these are, and Rebekah is going to display these. Let it come to pass that the damsel to whom I shall say, let down thy pitcher of water, I pray thee, that I may drink. And she will say, drink. And, now notice, he could have stopped right there. And I will give thy camels to drink also. Let the same be she that thou hast appointed for thy servant. Now, did you notice those words there? Let her be the one that you have appointed for Isaac. Folks, it's my conviction. Now, there is, and some of you may believe this, and you may be right, but there is the conviction among not a few Christians that God has not one specific person for you to marry. There may be 10 out there, and any one of the 10 will make you as good a wife as the other 9 whom you don't marry. And you can choose. Now, I don't have that conviction. And one reason is what I see here. Let her be the one whom is singular you have appointed. This servant and I think he probably got his theology from Abraham, is of the conviction that God prepares one man and one woman for each other unless one dies or unless one leaves the other. Then I think you have the right to remarry. But one reason I don't believe that there are 10 women that I could have married, now I just happened to pick number 2. Now, if Sue and I have trouble in marriage, of course we're going to have trouble in marriage. But when we have difficulty, I might be tempted to think this way. Oh, I wonder if I had chosen number 4 instead of number 2, would things be better? Would I be a more happily married man? What if I'd have chosen number 8? Would she be a better housekeeper than number 2, etc., etc.? Oh, that's dangerous to start thinking that way. So the way Sue and I do it is, we're having trouble. So what we've learned to do, let's go back to the beginning. Now let's review how God led us together. And we can see the hand of God. Now with that reminder, with that conviction that God led us together, God wants us to be married, let's sit down and work our way through this difficulty. So I really appreciate, I like what this man says here. May she be the one that thou hast appointed for thy servant, and thereby shall I know that you have showed kindness to my master. Now the answer is on the way in verse 15 before the man even finishes his prayer. And it came to pass, before he had done speaking, that is praying, that behold, the word behold means look. Now you and I weren't there. And the writer is using the word behold in an attempt to say, now you weren't there, but picture this. Let me present it as though you're standing by that well, and you see this man on his knees praying, and you see Rebekah walking down the path. Behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abram's brother, with her pitcher upon her shoulder. Now why does God send Rebekah before he finished praying? Now he could have waited till he finished praying, or he could have waited an hour, or the next day, or next week, and brought them together. I think the fact that God sent Rebekah before his prayer was up shows how eager God is to bless his people, to meet our needs. Now verse 16 describes Rebekah. And the damsel was very fair to look upon, a virgin, neither had any man known her, and she went down to the well and filled her pitcher and came up. So I think the reference here to her purity is to remind us this is God's standard, sexual purity. Now in verse 17, the servant asked for a drink. And in verse 18, she provides it. And she said, drink, my Lord. Now notice how respectful she is. That word Lord would be the equivalent to our sir. Please drink, sir. And she hastened and let down her pitcher upon her hand and gave him a drink. Now in verse 19, Rebekah goes beyond the servant's request. He had asked only that she give him a drink and a drink to the camels. Verse 19, and when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw water for thy camels also until they have done drinking. I won't give your camels a drink. I'm gonna water them until they're full. Do you know how many gallons of water a camel can drink? 25. So how many camels does he have who have just come in from a long trip through the desert? How many camels? 10. So how many gallons is he going to take to fill these gas tanks here? What would that be? 250. And I just suspect that the servant said to the servants who were with him, remember he's taking a bunch of servants, don't you guys sit and let that lady do all the work. Up, get out there and help her water these animals. At least I hope that's what he did. If he didn't, I think Rebekah was worn out when this day was over with. Now, the servant is not passive. Notice how wise this man is in verse 21. And the man, wondering at her, held his peace. Now, what's he wondering about? Remember, he doesn't know this woman. Is she single? Is she married? Is she available? Who is her family? Would she be willing to go with me, a man she doesn't know, to a place she's unfamiliar with? Is she the right one? So the man was wondering, to wit, whether God had made his journey prosperous or not. And he rewards her in verse 22 for her generous service. And it came to pass, as the camels had done drinking, that the man took a golden earring of half a shekel weight, and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold. Now what's he doing? He is recompensing her, expressing his great appreciation for what she has just done. And now he's going to seek information in verse 23. And he said, but that would be better translated, he asked, whose daughter are you? So he wants to know about the family. Tell me, I pray thee, is there room in thy father's house for us to lodge in? He sort of has a lot of gall to be asking something like that. Me and my 10 camels and all my servants, you got any space for us tonight? She replies in 24, and she said unto him, I'm Bethuel's daughter, the son of Milcah, that would be her grandmother, which she bore unto Nahor. Now one commentator writes, things are working better than the servant had hoped. Rebekah is related to the one family in the area related to Abraham. God's hand now is becoming more and more apparent. Rebekah reacts in verse 28. And the damsel ran and told them of her mother's household these things. Now, the servant is sure this is the right woman. You're sure she's the right woman. I'm sure she's the right woman. But what about Rebekah's family? Are they sure? Verse 29 introduces a prominent figure. Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban. Oh, he's going to be trouble with a capital T to somebody. Who's he going to cause a lot of trouble to? Jacob. Yeah. And Laban ran out of the house unto the well. Now, Laban is impressed and aroused by what? The sense of hospitality? Oh, no. He is flabbergasted at those gifts that his sister has come home with. He's thinking she must have encountered a billionaire down at the watering hole. In verse 29, Laban, the last part of verse 29, Laban ran out of the house under the well. And what caused Laban to pursue him? Verse 30, and it came to pass when he saw the earring and the bracelets upon his sister's hands, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, thus the man spoke unto me, that he came unto the man. Laban went to the man. Behold, he stood by the camels of the well. Laban doesn't want to let this big fish slip away. Now the servant's too burdened to talk. Laban takes the servant and his camels and his servants to his father's house, and they're now, in verse 33, they're all sitting down to eat, and there was set meat before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I have told my errand, and he said, speak on. Now, what's more important, and I'm sure the man's hungry, they've been on a long trip, 400 miles, and no doubt he wants to eat, but he's got something more important on his mind. And that recalls what Jesus said, my food is to do the will of who sent me. That ought to be our attitude as well. More important than food to you and me. Now, food is very important to you and me. That's why we eat 3 times a day. We have to eat to stay alive, to stay healthy, to stay strong. God made us to need food. Food is important to us. Jesus was saying, more important to me than food is doing the task that God has given me. God has assigned you and me a task. That ought to be our top priority in life. We are in verse 33. I will not eat until I have told my errand. And he said, speak on. In verse 35, the servant begins pouring out his heart. And the Lord, now he gives him a lot of details. I'm not giving you the verses where he gives all the details. The Lord has blessed my master greatly, Abraham, and he has become great. and has given him flocks and herds and silver and gold and men servants and maidservants and camels and donkeys. So he's got to convince Rebekah's family to let her go. She will be well taken care of and supported. So why is he telling her family about all of these I don't have that. I don't know what happened to that slide. Well, okay. Let's go to. Let me just mention this. Why is he giving this information? He wants to assure. He wants to give a token proof of Abraham's wealth to assure Rebekah's family she'll be well provided for. Isaac was born in the parents' old age, so the son of one brother is close in age to the granddaughter of the other brother. Isaac is Abraham's sole heir, so he's going to be a wealthy man. Abraham's wife must be Mesopotamian, not Canaanite. This was a requirement of Abraham. And the prayer was made that God would prosper his trip, which he has undertaken. And the writer is saying that this match seems to be from God. Now he continues in verse 36. And Sarah, my master's wife, bare a son to my master when she was old, and unto him he has given all that he has. Isaac, Rebekah's husband, will be Abraham's sole heir. Now, verse 45 recounts his meeting Rebekah at the right time. And before I had done speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came forth with her pitcher on her shoulder, and she went down into the well and drew water. And I said to her, let me drink, I pray thee. Now, after he finishes giving all the details, he asks the family in verse 49 for a decision. Now, if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. And if not, tell me, that I may turn to the right hand or left hand. In other words, are you going to consent to Rebekah going with me? Now, give me an honest answer, and if you say no, I need to know that so I can look elsewhere for another woman. Verse 50, then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, the thing proceeds from the Lord. In other words, and they're correct about that. They are so impressed with the way God led that man and his prayer being answered and all the details in it, they're convinced that God's been in this. So they say the thing proceeds from the Lord. They're correct. But then look what they say. We cannot speak unto thee good or bad. They're incorrect about that. If this is from the Lord, wouldn't it be good? Yes. But we have to remember that Laban, of all people, and his father were not spiritual giants. And verse 51, the family changes its mind. Behold, Rebekah is before thee, take her and go, and let her be thy master's son's wife, as the Lord has spoken. It's hard to let Rebekah go. And the family's not wholehearted about it. So in verse 55, and her brother and her mother said, let the damsel abide with us a few days, at least 10, and after that she shall go. Now, why do they want her to abide? Well, they got some pretty good reasons. We realize that once she leaves home, we will probably never see her again, and they didn't. Give us time to prepare for her departure. Give us some time to get used to her absence. Let her have time to do a good job packing and say goodbye to all her friends. And so after that, she may go. Now, he sees peril in that. And in verse 56, he says, hinder me not, seeing the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. Don't delay me, because a delay letting her stay here for a while can become permanent. And Abraham may die before I get back. Now the family seeks Rebekah's opinion in verse 58. And they called Rebekah and said unto her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. Now the family's parting prayer is offered in verse 60. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, thou art our sister, be thou the mother of thousands of millions. In other words, we want you to have innumerous offspring. Lo and behold, That's one of the promises God made to Abraham and to Isaac. And look at what else her family says. And let your seed possess the gate of those who hate them. May your children be successful over all of their adversaries. To put it differently, God assured Abraham and Isaac, you will be victorious when you over the Canaanites, and you will possess the land eventually, and not them. And in verse 61, Rebekah leaves. Rebekah arose, and her damsels, that is her maids, and they rode upon camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Now, I'm sure that on the way, the servant was thinking of Philippians 1:6. Well, maybe not, but the truth of it, he who began a good work in you will finish it. And I suspect that on the way, now this is a long trip, and so Rebekah says to the servant, tell me everything you know about Isaac. Introduce him to me in conversation before you introduce him to me face to face. You know, that's really important. One of the fine girls at Moody that Sue and I have been dealing with recently went out west to visit her sister and came back and informed me and Sue I got a boyfriend. Met him out west when my sister recommended him. We said, tell us about him. And she told us about him, and Sue and I told her, that man will be utter poison for you. On the first date, he asked her if he could touch her improperly. The first date. Absolutely not. We beg you, break up. Have nothing to do with him. And so we question her sister's judgment in recommending this man. And so I think Rebekah is wise. Let me have all the information. It's still not too late. She can turn around and go home if what she finds out about Isaac is inappropriate. And so we're thankful that that Moody girl followed our advice and severed the relationship. It was just bad from the first day. Now, attention turns in verse 62 from the bride to the groom. And Isaac came out the way of the well of Lahai Roi. Now, does that ring a bell? Who called this spot that Isaac goes to Lahai Roi? Anybody remember? Hagar did. When she ran away from Sarah, and they were out in the desert, she and Ishmael were out in the desert, about to die, and God approached her and said, don't worry, I'll take care of you. And she named the place Lahai Roi, the one who lives and sees and hears. And God spared her and her son Ishmael. And that made a deep impression upon Isaac. So where has he been going while the servant is up in Mesopotamia looking for a wife? He's been going to Lahai Roi, since this is the well of the God who lives and sees and hears and answers prayer. He was pouring his heart out in asking, not just for a wife, anybody can get married. He was asking for the right wife. For he dwelt in the south country, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field at evening time, and he lifted up his eyes and saw, and looked, behold, camels were coming. And the first encounter is recorded in 64. And Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she lighted off the camel. Now there's tension here. As they're about to meet, are they going to like each other? And why did she dismount? Verse 65, for she had said to the servant, what man is this that walks out in the field to meet us? And the servant said, it is my master. Therefore she took a veil and covered herself. Well, it was their custom back there. Before a woman married the man, she kept her face veiled. And verse 66 informs Isaac all that had happened. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. 67, and Isaac brought her into his mother's tent. That's a token that he has accepted her. And he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Two people divinely prepared for each other will definitely love each other. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And so if Isaac and Rebekah ever doubt they married the right person. They just have to review the series of events that happened when God led them together. All right, so several things of application. Number one, God takes personal interest in you. You and I are not lost. Just think about every day. God deals with trillions of things throughout the universe, billions of angels, billions of people. It's easy for us to think I get lost in the crowd. God can't possibly keep up with me. God is sovereign over not only the planets and stars, over the earth's nations, but sovereign in your life. Nothing happens to you without divine consent. God pays attention to details. He knew you before creating the universe. He saves every tear. The book of Psalms says you've ever shed in a bottle. He numbers each hair on your head. He counts the steps you take daily. He bears each of your burdens. He carries all your griefs. Now tell me that God doesn't pay attention to the details in your life and mine, minutely, down to every insignificant hair on our head. God has a plan for the universe. God has a plan for the world. God has a plan for Israel. God has a plan for you. Think about it, folks. You have on your end of your fingers prints that nobody else in the world has. That's how unique you are. God didn't put you down here and say, well, I don't really have anything specific for you to do, but go ahead and look around. I'm sure you'll come up with something worthwhile to do. Go to it. Go to it. Remember what Jesus said? I finished the task that you gave me. Remember what Paul said? I have run the course. I have finished the course. The course means the work that God has given me. God has a bright future for you in this life. Remember Psalm 31:19. Oh, how great is the goodness that you have stored up for those who fear you, which goodness you dispense to them in the sight of others. And lastly, God has a great plan for you in heaven. He has a place reserved just for you. Have you accepted that place by faith? By relying on Christ for the pardon of sins, you will occupy and enjoy that place forever. Think about it. God's already got plans for you up there.